Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. We just did our soft start. This is Nighttime Logic, January 14th, 2021. I'm here with Sarah Langan. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
So let's just hang out for a bit and chit chat for about 5 or 10 minutes. We started a bit early, and we'll give people just a few minutes to get here. So yeah, we were chatting chatting about kids and horror movies before we went live here. I was telling Sarah how I was watching Mad Max Fury Road with my nephew, and how he back when he was like around 9 or 10, and I was just amazed at how he just guessed the structure. And now in the years since then, he's just, I guess kids who watch a lot of Netflix or they watch a lot of media, like I just was amazed how he has genres and structures in his mind, and I guess he's able to make these amazing predictions from just watching little bits of things.
I think kids are just more sophisticated about story than we were, and I don't think stories were as cohesive, or when they were cohesive, you remember them like great,
Yeah,
just
there
more
was
material.
a lot more seat of the pants and drugs in Hollywood back when they were making things for us. I was watching, Sarah, did you ever see oh, it was just a terrible movie, but like a great B movie called it's either called The Boogans or The Bogans. Did you see this one?
I've heard of it.
It's so bad, but I just remember because it was a movie I was watched. I saw, actually I didn't see it as a kid. It was a movie like my dad saw in the theater, and I was like, "What's it about? What's it about?" And my dad like told me about it, and he actually drew the monster because there was no internet or no nothing. I'm like, what's the monster? And he's like, oh, okay. So he just like drew the monster. So I remember it fondly for that, but I came back and watched it, and of course it's a miserable movie, but it was worth it because they had like a DVD track, and like the filmmakers had become friends, like the writer and the filmmaker. The filmmaker saying like, yeah, I totally lied to the producer. I convinced him that there was this monster and it was real. It was this real Irish folktale. He's like, but I was so high and I totally just made it up, and he bought it. He totally believed it. I'm like, yeah, that explains the movie.
It was like every other Tales from the Dark Side. Like some good ones, and then there was like, I don't know why anyone spent money on this, but it was because there was no other programming at the time.
What year was Tales from the Dark Side?
I would say 86 to 90.
Okay.
On Channel 11, right? We're from Long Island. It was Channel
Yeah,
11.
yeah, Channel 11. Yeah, I don't remember. I remember Channel 11 because it was the Saturday afternoon. That was Saturday afternoon monster movies, and like sometimes after school they would sometimes play like those Godzilla movies. I
Oh
remember.
yeah. Yeah, and then in the summertime, Channel 9 used to play horror movies.
Oh yeah, what was that? Was that called Creature Feature, or what was that called?
It might have
I
been.
remember something like that.
Like they had like sea monster movies, they had like vampire movies, they had like Salem witch trial. Like it was any weird, low budget. Yeah.
Oh man. Um, have you watched Disney's The Black Hole? Speaking of fantastic movies, have you watched that lately? Did you watch that with the kids or?
No, they would have been
No.
like, this is so bad. Like, why would we ever watch this?
What makes you think I want to go back to Earth, kids?
It it's of its time. I bet people
Yeah.
thought it was really cool. I mean, it was like a huge budget movie. And they had that, remember in 2001, the Gravity, where the air stewardess, but she's like, it's a spaceship, is on that
Yeah,
circular thing walking around.
I
I think it
remember
blew
that.
people's minds. They were like, oh my God, there's like gravity elevators and all these things that, these laws of physics that apply to space. And it's so cool. And then Disney was like, we're going to do it. We're going to do 2001 for kids. And then, I mean, it like, for a B movie, it was pretty cool. Like the reveal, like
Yeah.
that was a cool reveal. You kind of knew already. Like, I really think it was a surprise. Even if
I mean, black holes. I mean, we've come so far, and even though we have so much, so far to go, but we have come so far in astronomy and observation. I mean, black holes loomed large in my childhood in terms of like cool things. When you're a kid, like, yeah, it's a black hole. Like, I mean, it was just this amazing mystical thing, but it was also real. So I mean, you can't blame them for making a movie like that. Much like, I guess, like the moonshot movies around the turn of the century, I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like they didn't know, they were just like, I guess, a man on the moon, a person on the moon was such looming so large in imagination there. All right, I think people are coming, so I'm going to run our opening video, and we'll start it up after the video again. See you on the other side of it. Okay, we're back. Welcome, everyone. We're going to start the event. Welcome to Nighttime Logic. Welcome to everyone watching us. We're broadcasting this live on January 14th, 2021, and we'll also extend a welcome to everyone who tunes in during the archive. And tonight's guest is Sarah Langan. I'll read Sarah's bio for all of you. Sarah Langan grew up in Long Island and has an MFA in creative writing, as well as a master's in environmental health science toxicology. She now lives in Los Angeles with her husband, daughters, and a giant pushy rabbit, who I don't think is going to be joining us tonight. She is the author of the novels The Keeper, The Missing, and Audrey's Door. And her latest, Good Neighbors, is out from Simon & Schuster, I believe, in February 2nd, 2021, just a little bit. She's received 3 Bram Stoker Awards, and her work has often been included in the best of the years lists and anthologies. She recently published You Have the Prettiest Mask in Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, edited by Gavin Grant and Kelly Link from Small Beer Press. And her novelette, The Night Nurse, appears in the Best Horror of the Year, Volume 12, edited by Ellen Datlow. Welcome to Sarah Langan. How are you, Sarah?
I'm great. Thank you.
Good to hear. So the new book, Good Neighbors, it's out February 2nd from Simon & Schuster. I think it's going to be out in hardcover, ebook, audiobook format, wherever you get books. The quote on the cover is from Liv Constantine, who calls it a modern-day crucible. Beneath the surface of a suburban utopia, madness lurks. So congratulations on that, and for all the wonderful advanced reviews and advanced acclaim. Since the book is not out at the time of our talk, we're going to keep it spoiler-free. So what do you want readers to know? What can you tell readers about the book before they pick it up? What's the verbal back cover?
Um, well, I think people keep asking me like, but is it horror? Will I like this? You know, how different is it? Is it just a lady book now? And I think the answer is both. Like, and it's not that I'm like trying to please everyone. It's honestly, if I'm to judge from the reviews that I'm already getting on Goodreads, it's still disturbing. So if you like that, if you like having to think about um, your place and the way that we've all sort of participated in the fractures of American society, then you're going to like it. And it's dark. But is it horror? Well, that nothing supernatural happens in it. And it's not a slasher. And if you're like, I really want every book she writes to be like The Missing, I want this to be The Missing, this isn't The Missing. So, but it's got a little Keeper and it's got a little Audrey Store.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, horror is such a broad umbrella, but I guess marketing sometimes the difference between genres or the difference between categories is simply marketing or what we're telling it to be. But yeah, I guess you're putting it out there that there's no absolutely overt. This is not a supernatural book, but if you if you had to ask me, is this horror? I think the umbrella of horror is both wide enough to encompass the book and also it's the most in many ways it's the most distilled and most potent of what I think of horror in terms of okay, there aren't jump scares and slashers and ghosts, but the darkness in the relationship and the darkness in the people's relationship to this external event that could easily function as that is wow, yeah. If you're not going to call it horror, you have to put the word dark in there. Um, and it's set in Long Island, New York, which is a horror show all of itself. For those who don't know or aren't from the area, Long Island often refers to Nassau and Suffolk County as opposed to geographic Long Island, which includes like Brooklyn and the counties which are definitely not called Long Island, but geographically are. So we're talking about the suburbs here of New York City, and it's full of real places, the dreaded Croxley's Ale House and Nassau Community College and Hofstra University and Winthrop Hospital, to name a few. And so the book focuses on Maple Street, a place called Maple Street, and it's a street where everything happens on Maple Street in the book, and it feels like the suburbs that I knew and that I know, for better or for worse. So let's talk about the suburbs. What's good about them? Why are characters or why are people allured with them? And the main characters we're going to look at later are outsiders who want to come in and may make a decision to move into the suburbs. And throw in there what are the risks and ills of the suburbs, both to the characters and in general for you.
Well, I'll start with what I like about the suburbs, which is like I grew up in a town called Garden City, which is not the same town as this, but apparently I'm lazy. I was like, well, I like naming it Garden City though. um, but you know, what I liked about it a lot was that sense of community that I had. It was homogenous. It was white, upper middle class. I think people who weren't upper middle class had a hard time just because there was so much materialism. But there was community, there was opportunity, there was safety at night. There was, you know, we could walk home at all hours and go to parties all night and walk home to our house. And it was super fun to grow up in that environment. And what I also loved about it was it'll always be a place I came from, and it'll define me in that way that I feel I'm really lucky to have because it has an identity. And I can hear my kids in the background.
That's the perfect backdrop to this.
Yeah. But actually, my kids don't get that as much. You know, we grew up in Brooklyn, or you know, we moved here to LA 4 years ago, and they'll have that, but people are so much more transient there. In Brooklyn and here, they move. Eventually, you have too many kids and you have to move to the suburbs, or your family's wherever, or you move for a job. Whereas I felt like when I grew up in Garden City, that was where we had our roots. That was where people had decided to live and raise families. And when my mom died in June, and it was published in the town paper, her obituary, and I heard from kids from kindergarten. They reached out to me on Facebook to be like, I loved your mom and I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And you should visit next time, or come to my house or come see me. And like, I just, it's so heartwarming. It's a really beautiful thing to have those ties and to have someone have known you for that long. And also, there were of course like super mean kids, and there were awkward kids, and there were all different things. But when you get to grow up with people from kindergarten through college, you see how the story works. So you don't have a confused impression of oh, that mean kid wound up having this happen, or that mean kid got everything they wanted. It's like, no, you saw what happened to them in college, or you met their dad one time and you were like, sorry that you have to deal with that, dude. And having that in a town, it helps you mature, I think, and it helps you have a sense of other people's social identities. The problem with it for me was, I think I was a misfit, but in truth, I think everybody's a misfit. We're all just better or worse at hiding it, or we're more or less comfortable showing it. And I think particularly in Garden City, when I was growing up, it was all white. It was racist. It was sexist. I think more so than other places, more metropolitan places. And I think the more alike you are, the more driven toward conformity you are, because you have so few differences between you, but everyone is constantly knowing each other and comparing and trying to figure out who's where is everyone. And so, what were they wearing? What's this person's job? What does this person's dad do? Was all stuff people really cared about. And you couldn't be different in ways that you could in a more anonymous place, or even a more heterogeneous place. So, I think that can lead to some real small-mindedness and sort of unnecessary fears. I think people get scared that, their kid will be seen as different, so their kid's not allowed to be different. So it becomes the answer to a question that's never been asked. Just shut up. Just do what I tell you. Just, that person's bad. Don't hang out with them. So, it's a town.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up. I was raised in Long Island as well, not terribly far from Garden City. Maybe, maybe 10 or 15 miles away. Maybe the metaphorical other side of the tracks. But I relate to everything that you say about the suburbs. I guess I was fortunate enough that my little alcove or my little Maple Street, I was like, looking back at it, I was so fortunate that we were a block of outsiders. There was the Jewish family, or the family with the gay son, and then there was the house with two moms, and then there was the African American family or the Asian. It was like we used to call our block the little United Nations out of a joke. But I look back now and see just how fortunate I was to be this little island of sanity and stability and all those good things, where the mobs of kids and the materialism and the sexism and the racism and all this stuff is just like a background. It's the perfect horror setting, it's great how you said when you grow up in it, you get to see the story and you're seeing people over time, and it's just so astute, as opposed to in our lives, if we're living in a city, or even if we're seeing a snapshot of now. And I guess as writers and and thinkers. Yeah, there's something about seeing a town or the people that make it up over time, and that's really present in the book Good Neighbors. I mean, I found Good Neighbors to be a book about. I found it to be unflinching in that regard, and really insightful about relationships. And I, I feel like the core of the book is relationships between husbands and wives, between parents and their children, between children and other children, and then all these groups and each other in close proximity, neighbors. And in the middle of all this that you just spoke about, and that as a reader I just looked at, we have a sinkhole. So it's a literal hole, um, that opens up in their neighborhood right by their homes. So I have a bunch of questions for you, tonight about these people and their relationships, about the children, about the individuals, about the families, and then I'll also ask you some questions about the sinkhole and how it works in the story. So let's start with the kids. I'm just going to read a real quick line that stood out to me, in the book. Julia looked across the hot, empty park and the hole behind them, which kept getting bigger. Nothing made sense. Nothing was how it was supposed to be because the world was upside down. All grown-ups were kids, and the kids were on their own, and maybe that's how it had been all along. So, tell us about these kids in the book. The kids everyone calls, the Rat Pack, and their world and the reality that they're facing in the book.
Well, so Julie and Larry Wilds are the newcomers to town, and everybody else in the block has known each other since, preschool. And it's a very isolated cul-de-sac. So everybody's done barbecues with each other's families. They all know each other really well, and they all have this history. And Julie and Larry show up, and they're from Brooklyn and East New York, Brooklyn, which is still not nice. And they just don't have any of the affectations of the middle class in a way that's noticeable and easy to judge. And that's what people do in the suburbs. It's like, why can't that kid read? What's wrong with that kid? Why do they talk like that? Why is their mom dressed trashy? What's going on with that? And I think what kids do is they echo everything that their parents have taught them to echo and what their parents say, but they're so much louder about it, and because they don't know that it's not okay, as their parents do, but can't help themselves. So Julie and Larry are walking into that, and Julia has to figure out, because her brother Larry is younger than her, is not neurotypical. And so he's not going to fit in unless she figures out a way to make it smooth for him, to be so liked that no one will mess with him. And she's kind of always felt that was her job. And her parents have made it clear that's her job, is to make things okay for Larry, to take care of Larry, because they're too busy. And it's a lot of responsibility. So that's what they walk into. And then the sinkhole shows up. But also, Julia is actually pretty successful at fitting in with these guys, because she's tough, and she doesn't take a lot of nonsense. And the kids respect that. But I think there's this feeling among the children of Maple Street that something's really wrong, and my kids feel it. Every once in a while, my daughter Frances will just she'll start crying, and I'll say, what is it? And she's like, I know we're safe, but what about all these people with COVID? And I'll go, well, okay, but I've said things like, well, maybe you could give that to me to worry about, because I'm the grown up, and there's nothing you can do about it, and I'll do what I can about it. And she's like, you think it works that way? It doesn't work that way. I can't stop these feelings, and I can't stop knowing that the world is getting worse, and I can't stop knowing that when I get older, that this global warming isn't going to get any better, because it's not. It hasn't so far. And such a burden on children. I mean, there's the personal burdens parents put on their kids, but I think it's the age of social media. Like we all knew like that the polar ice caps were melting years ago, and we all knew that the ozone layer was going to go away. We had to stop using aerosols, but it wasn't. We weren't constantly bombarded with it, so that we had this endless sense of dread. Actually, we were a little bit because remember the day after, and like
Yeah,
we're gonna die. The
just
Russians are gonna kill us.
one big bomb, not one of the constant
Our
doom
hair is gonna
scrolling.
be falling out. Yeah, we did have that, and I remember being. I think they have it worse, and I hate that, but they do have it worse. And it's not fair. And well, you're going to make it better. Don't worry, is such a ridiculous pressure to put on children. Um, it's our job. We're the ones, it's our prime. We make it better. It's not their problem. And I feel like what I learned about parenthood, and I'm still learning, and I'm trying to be a better parent, and it's an evolution is you do have to hold things for them. Anything you possibly can hold for them that they don't have to know about, don't make them know about it. Um, it's just part of the job. And I feel like on Maple Street, uh, you can't help it. You slip up sometimes. Like Gertie is constantly slipping up and letting her kids know what she's upset about. And it's like, no, you go for a walk, you come back. They don't need to know. But I think that's just a tool she hasn't yet learned. And I think that's a tool a lot of them uh, haven't yet learned, or they're so upset and scared about their own positions on this block where it's not like where I grew up. It's less upper middle class, it's more middle class, and people are very worried about their jobs, and they're worried about the future. And they're imbuing their children with this sense of fear of everyone different and everything. And on top of that, this idea that the world's only getting worse, kids. So look to your left, look to your right. Better make sure you're the one who survives. And these kids love each other, and it's a horrible situation. And they're talking to each other about it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you're yeah, I feel kindly towards Gertie. I feel like you're being kind to your characters, like, oh, they slip up a little bit. No, you have some. Yeah, there's some people on Maple Street who are doing exactly the opposite of the parenting that you're talking about. You know, there are parents there where they are either intentionally or just out of recklessness placing these pressures and prejudices on their kids, and it's really amazing in the book how the book we see all these perspectives. We see all the different families. And that's how we get Maple Street becomes a character from all these perspectives. And you can't help but favorably compare that, at least the initial part of the book, um, to one of our favorite authors, Stephen King. Stephen King does does do that as well, but yeah, you do this like really with like a singular intent of bringing out what you just said there. But the other the other person that I felt, if I had to say, well, what is this book like? Who does it remind me of? As the book goes on, I feel like the book is so much more Jack Ketchum than it is Stephen King. And what I mean by that is, in terms of horror, I haven't read a lot of Ketchum, but his horror is often the true crime or the horror that people do um, to each other. And both those comparisons are a testament to the amazing strength of the book there. Here's a line that sort of captures both those threads. They acted like good neighbors, but they weren't. They've all written blogs and gone on chat shows and cashed in. Honestly, weren't any of them really friends? So what were your influences and inspirations for the book? And what are some of the real world challenges or the challenges that the characters face that an outsider coming to the suburb, a nonconformist, when they face this tyranny of the conformity that you've put forth in there.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for the comparisons. Of course, I love Stephen King. Um, Jack Ketchum was my friend, and like I think about him sometimes, and I miss him. And
Yeah.
he really took me under his wing, and he was I miss him all the time. And so that's a real compliment to me. And
I miss him too. I had the chance to know him later in life. I was around him when all of you guys were friends. I was scared of Jack Ketchum for most of the time that I knew him. And when I finally got to know him, I confessed that I was like, I haven't read a word of your stuff. And he's like, why? I'm like, I think it's gonna fuck me up, man. But the compliment with everything that I have, I need it.
he had his first book he pretended to be his own agent. Like he was an agent and then he sold his own stuff. Like it was so clever and amazing. And then like people were like, it was going to get a huge push. I remember him telling me the story, and then like early readers, or he got a new editor and the old editor was fired. She became morally offended by what he'd written and just like buried it, which is, I think I have that right. But I'm sure Dallas had to put up with that kind of stuff all the time. Yeah, he was lovely. He was really lovely. We used to have dinner or lunch every year. Usually with champagne. Ridiculous. He was great. But back to the question. First off, yeah, I mean, I think I want to circle back to what you brought up about genre. Like, what would you say about this? Is this horror? How would you categorize it? And I think with this book, both my agent and my editor kept pushing me to go deeper, to say the more honest thing, to tell the more complete story. And that's really hard to do. And I think that's the job. And I think every genre, be it literary or horror or romance or whatever, there have to be places that touch a nerve in some way, that make you think about something in a new way, that articulate something that you felt and you know is true, but you've never seen in this particular light or expressed in this way. And I think more than I was shooting for any kind of genre, I was trying to get there, and I was trying to say, well, okay, I have this idea, and I knew what the idea was, right, for what was going to happen to these people. But the more and more I thought about it, I thought, well, people are actually mostly good. And I believe that. And people are actually, reluctant toward violence. So there would have to be a very specific set of situations and circumstances for these things to happen. And they would have to be much more realistic than what I'm currently doing. And so, I feel like you could call it true crime. You could call it horror. You could call it, there's pieces of romance. You could call it literary or spec fiction or climate fiction. But all I was trying to do was to say, I have this idea for a story, and I feel like it articulates to me what is happening in the world. And it's the best idea I can come up with and the best explanation for for this world right now and these huge fractures. But how do I tell this story where people believe it? And I want people to close the book and go, that happened. I see how that would happen. And I see how these things generally happen. And I have a better insight into it. So blah, 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 blah. I'm talking, but that was what I was thinking about. And then one more thing, and then I'll actually answer your question, which is when you brought up Stephen King, there's a scene at the end that, was natural to the story, but I think has a lot of shades of it in it. And I think it hit me at a point in my life. I was like 16 when I read it, where it sort of flavored how I saw things. So I think that's, and I'm grateful to that book. And then I can't remember the question.
Oh no, I was just listening. You were talking, but so much is making sense, and even the fact that you've been influenced so much uh, by Dallas and by Stephen King. I see, it is the book that, for whatever you want to think about the book, I happen to think quite highly of it. It captures the sense of a pack like no other, and we have that going on here with the Rat Pack. And I'm so glad that you said, you talked about your process, and you said, oh, regardless of genre, I had a team that was willing to let me dive deep into this idea, to dive deep into something that I know is true but is upsetting. And that's like Dallas, Jack Ketchum 101. What he'll tell anyone who will talk to him or his students will be, if you come away with one thing, like what's the one line in the Dallas book of writing, it's don't look away, and don't flinch in that. And I think it's deceptively simple. Like you said, oh, it's really hard to do. And I do agree. And that's one of the things, that's one of the hallmarks that we see in Good Neighbors, is we see these characters, and even the people that we might be tempted to, or we might just say are outright villainous or the antagonists. You show them, and it's like you said about the suburbs. You show them over time, and you show their wounds, and you show it doesn't excuse their villainy, or it doesn't excuse what they've done, but we have a picture of it, and it's absolutely, you can't look away from it, both as the author and both as the reader. Yeah, so I guess my question was, what are the challenges of like the outsider in uh, coming to these packs? But I feel like you've
In a
addressed
roundabout
that.
way, maybe.
What's that?
In a roundabout way, maybe.
Yeah, no, in a more interesting way. But it's
I
really,
will say one more thing is like it wasn't like I was looking at people going like, I'm gonna look at how bad they are, like I won't flinch from like the bad. I don't really see people like human nature as bad. I think most people are good. It's often just like, how do two people really relate to each other? And it's like this conversation is like the surface conversation, and in 50 conversations I'll have the right conversation, and like these people don't interact in this way. No, like it's just constantly honing and saying, but what's true? And it's not just like what I want to say or what my preconceptions are. It's I'm a feminist. I see everything through a feminist lens, and I get infuriated when I read books by guys, by women heroines who come to love being mothers. And it's like, oh, you know what? Like, go tame somebody else. But at the same time, I have preconceptions that come into my work all the time about the ways that people relate, and I have to get over those. And I tend to, just because it's more entertaining, to make things darker, to make people say worse things. And what I actually did a lot of the time was pull that back, because people don't say, kids do sometimes, but grownups, it's an evil look, and you're like, oh, damn, that person hates me. They snarled, well, no one was looking. Doing that is a crazy thing for an adult to do. That's enough.
well, yeah, I was sort of talking around. I didn't want to talk to spoilers, and you definitely hit on some things that I wanted to ask you. So I'll just go ahead and ask them now. Like you said, okay, yeah, we're not I'm not just doing this in-depth portrait of a villain, and I see that. And you mentioned the feminist lens, and that's something I wanted to ask you about, that because it's so fascinating to me in these depictions. Like, some of the characters, I don't. I feel like you're shining a light on them with a lot of nuance, and not just, oh, this is why the villain became the villain. It's almost like showing when we're getting you've given the present scene, you've given the snapshot of now, which is these events on Maple Street, but even the perpetrators, you go back in time and forward in time so we could see their stories. And I might be mangling the way we talk about it. You're showing us what I'm going to say as their wounds. Perhaps you're showing us how these people, in addition to maybe being villains or perpetrators, are tragedies, at least in their own stories. And yeah, not to laugh at this, you were talking about on social media not too long ago. We were talking about Wonder Woman, not we, you were talking about Wonder Woman 1984. And you had mentioned that, right. So there's a lot that's laughable about that movie, and there's a lot that's wrong with that movie. But one of the things that I just can't stop thinking about was how you said, oh, yeah, this movie, my daughters and I looked at this movie from all what we liked about this movie is that all the motivations were coming from the pains or the wounds of the characters, and that was a feminist lens, or feminist lens or not, that was just a lens of the movie. And it's one of those things that snapped the movie into place for me. I'm like, oh my god, I totally can watch and understand this movie now. And that's funny because it's coming in the context of a superhero, a pop culture thing. But you do that for everyone. Everyone gets that treatment in Good Neighbors. So yeah, if you could, I'd love for you to talk about that, both as it relates to Wonder Woman, both as it relates to Good Neighbors, as you see fit.
I thought Wonder Woman was like a blast. I had so much fun with it, and my daughters did too. And I was saddened by how disappointed people. I was disappointed in disappointed people. But, but I was like, not everything has to be a tour de force. It can be like some kind of kooky, artistic, personal thing that has its own statement. And I felt like that's what that Wonder Woman was. And to me, I thought it was what was feminine about it was the idea that people who search power and validation and specialness are really acting from like trying to cover a wound and using that specialness as a shield. And that's what the main villain does. And that's what Kristen Wiig's character does. And that's, I don't want to give any spoilers, but the dad.
Oh, everyone's seen it. Go for it.
Well, so like the dad keeps saying to his son, I'm going to be special and you're going to love me. And it's like, it's painful because everyone knows, like, that's like a trope that dads say to their kids, right? And it's what narcissists, do. It's, they need everyone to think they're special. And it's, but what a lot of women have to learn when they have kids, if they tend to be more often the primary caregivers, is like, your kid doesn't care anything about what you do. All they want is your attention and your love. And the idea of specialness, to me, I was surprised because when I made that post, a lot of people were like, but I'm special, and it's like, why do you need me to think you're special? Why do you need to think you're special? And what I mean by that is, like, everyone is unique. Everyone has something to offer the world. But I feel that this idea of specialness is a very American thing. And it's very much about, like, I'm better. If I work harder and if I make more money and if I do this one thing and I'm amazing at it, I'm better. And that makes me better. And that makes me special. And that makes me loved. And it's like, no, it doesn't. Like, make a sandwich for the person you love. And then the person you love makes you a sandwich and you're loved. But the book I wrote will not make me loved. I think I thought that when I was younger. And I think that was, that's what everybody younger thinks. But now, and I think, I think specialness is a real trap. And one more thing, I was thinking about this, is like, I was reading, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell, but I'm not sure, was talking about outliers. Maybe it was that book, but maybe it was an article on something else about geniuses and how geniuses tend to be ahead of everyone else, but everyone would have eventually come up with the idea. So, you know, Einstein, when he came up with relativity, he was about 10 years ahead of the curve. And I feel like once you realize that, well, okay, but then, you know, he was special, yes, but like probably more important that he was happy, because relativity would have been discovered. Anything we do, like, I love that I wrote this book. It means so much to me. It's an accomplishment to me. And that's my personal satisfaction. Do I need to be special? Do I need to be the only person who could have written this book? I'm not. You know, there's a billion talented people who could have. So is that the thing? And it shouldn't be. And that's what I mean by specialness. And that's what happens. And that's the deepest wound of the person in this book, who's the villain. She's a narcissist. And her history is so bad that she compensates with extreme narcissism and very pained narcissism. And she needs everyone to think she's perfect. And I studied narcissists a ton. Like I did so much research on them. And I really feel that she is representative of that. They tend to think they're more real than other people. And so that their actions in some ways are more important, but also are above. If they do bad things, it's as if it never really happened because they're in control of reality. So that's what my main character was. And I think that need to be adored over being in a mutual relationship is kind of male and very American.
I want to talk about that character in just a second, Rhea. But as you were talking about the specialness and as you were talking about fathers, it made me think of the depiction of another character who's not the villain in this. It made me think about Arlo. So before we go over to Rhea, I wanted to ask you about Arlo. Arlo maybe is someone who at some point in his life maybe was special. He's sort of a has-been rocker. Can you tell us who is this guy, and who is he when we meet him at the beginning of Good Neighbors and comes into this setup that you've been talking about?
Well, so he wrote a top 10 pop song with his bandmates when he was young, living in the East Village. And then he got addicted to heroin and blew it all and went into rehab and has a lot of anger issues. And I think what also happened with his career was that there wasn't any way back. Like, it wasn't like he'd made friends on the way up that he could be like, let me sleep on your couch. So he had a real comeuppance in the world, or comeuppance, whatever. Yeah. He went to rehab, he came out, and he met Gertie like a week later, you know, and Gertie is his wife and is the other parent newcomer in Good Neighbors. She's a beauty pageant queen, and he met her at a pageant. Like, I don't think this is in the book. I think I cut it, but he was, you know, a musician and approached her, and they really quickly fell in love, and they're both sort of very, very wounded people. What I like about them is that they're open about it, and they seem to whatever. I love them both, and I think Arlo, people from the outside, he looks like trouble.
Yeah. I mean, he just struck me as whether he succeeds or not, he struck me as the father who would understand what you just said, like, as opposed to like the villain, and a villain who would be like, you will love me, son, because I am the best oil man, as opposed to like Arlo is like the guy who would be like, yeah, I'll make you a sandwich and let's go on the slip and slide. You know, who would understand that depiction of love that you said there. But Arlo, yeah, like, he looks like trouble. And how do the people of Maple Street, how do they treat these outsiders, Gertie and Arlo? uh, who are on the outside and wanting to come in. And I guess
Well,
that leads us to Rhea, who right is this narcissistic gravity source on Maple Street.
well, I think Rhea is very, very, very lonely as a narcissist. Like, she moved to Maple Street way early. She's got older kids. She's older than Gertie and Arlo. And her husband's like 10 years older than her and German and works all the time. And she hardly ever sees him. Like, her job was to raise those kids, and he didn't care, and he wasn't going to have anything to do with it. And I think she did well. She raised good kids, and she fit in, and it was not easy for her to fit in. She kind of pretended to be someone that she wasn't. And she's getting tired of it by the time the book starts. She just wants to, something's wrong, and she knows something's wrong. And she'd like to not be feeling the way she's feeling anymore. So when Gertie moves in, she is like, a fly to a light. She's like, I just want what this woman has. I just want to be like this woman, and I want to be friends with this woman. And I think this would be amazing. And so she's immediately like, this is going to be my best friend. And the rest of the neighbors are like, she's a weirdo, but okay, we'll go along with it because you said so. And so everybody welcomes them into the fold kind of doubly. And then Rhea starts to get worried that first off, she has two worries. She starts to think that maybe the Wilds are harmful to her children, that there's something wrong with them, that they're doing something wrong, that they're a bad influence in some way. And it's a fear she can't get rid of. And then the other thing is she starts to worry, well, what if Gertie sees this real me that I don't even know what it is because I've hidden it for so long? I don't even know if it's real, if there isn't real me. But what if it's horrible? What if it's like disgusting? And what if she sees it and she hates me? I don't think I could take that. And so their rift that starts the opening of the book comes from a place of love, of sort of like a Band-Aid that pulled off, that took off the scab too. It's really, no one tends to hurt anyone in this book. It's just a question of not speaking to each other, not asking the questions, being too afraid to articulate what those questions are, being so afraid that that whatever questions you ask will reflect on you in ways that you won't be able to stand people to see.
Yeah, and we see those sort of masks and duplicity in the characters, particularly in Rhea. I guess we see her as her queen of the block when she's operating that way. But then, yeah, we also see this moments where she is in those private moments of like, who am I? How did I get here? Or maybe that David Byrne once in where is my beautiful?
That is exactly.
She embodies that, but in the most unfun of ways. Like, I mean, David Byrne makes it fun, but
Yeah.
but she's not wearing a giant suit. In fact, what she's doing is a lot of times she's watching the 1979 Disney movie The Black Hole. As a fan of bad movies, what's her relationship with that movie? Is that just coincidental? Is it symbolic?
Yeah, I mean, there's the sinkhole, there's the black hole. I'm trying to talk about these wounds that we carry, and they're invisible, and we don't know they're there. It's like you don't know what you don't know, but we all think we know everything. And so I think we're all fighting with invisible ghosts half the time. whenever we're scared of something or like something happens. And now we have to go approach someone in a not even a confrontational way, in a way that's like, I think our kids shouldn't play together this afternoon. Sorry, I don't know how to say this. Why are we so worried? And it's because we're thinking of something else that we're unaware of, because it's a coping mechanism we adapted before we were 10 years old. And I think as you get older, you grow out of these coping mechanisms and you sort of learn better ones, but they're always there, and I think, the black hole to me and the sinkhole, I don't want to
Okay.
analyze my own stuff too much, but there's that. And there's also like the generational debts we accrue, we are handing our kids an enormous bill that they have to pick up with global warming.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to come back to the sinkhole and the black hole. I mean, I did mention it because it's a good pivot that I did want to talk without giving too much away. I wanted to talk about the sinkhole in Good Neighbors. It's a real thing. I mean, it's a literal sinkhole, but it's also the catalyst that drives it drives the story, it drives the conflict. My analysis of it, even though I think it's quote unquote wrong, or at least just as a genre person, as a horror person, it was operating to me the way, even though this is not a supernatural book, at any time I wasn't sure if that sinkhole may or may not have become supernatural, or if its origins were supernatural. But it doesn't matter to the book because it operates in the same spot that something in good horror stories, or the horror stories that I like, operate. The story, it's not about what the sinkhole is, where it came from, how do we stop it with a wooden stake. It's about none of those things. It's about what does it do to these characters in the arcs that we are dropped right in the middle of. And you mentioned, or I read in your biography, and I know that you have a master's in science in environmental toxicology. So I'm thinking that this sinkhole is intended, or maybe you had something very different on your mind, and I'm like, oh, is the sinkhole this, or could it be that?
I think it's, you're allowed to come away with it. I don't know everything about what I'm doing. There are other people who might have better insights into it than I do. But I do want to say that things that we did once think were magic or impossible seem more and more possible with global warming. So like, maybe it's going to hail and, it'll be this size. Well, okay. And maybe there's going to be sinkholes on your street that go down 100 feet.
Yeah,
okay, that happens now. Or maybe there's going to be permafrost that melts, letting out anthrax that's thousands of years old and killing cows in Siberia. Yeah, no, that's real. That happened. Or the guy this week who injected... This isn't global warming. It's funny, though. The guy who injected magic mushrooms, he was like, I'm gonna get the best tie ever. I'm gonna inject it. And then it's fungus, though. You don't inject a fungus into your blood. He's alive.
Don't you know you eat those? Don't inject those. Eat those, young man.
Oh God, that was so like whatever. But I hope he's okay. But he they started growing the fungus in his blood, and he had to go take antifungals at the hospital. Anyway,
he was destined for a life of hallucination, for self-inflicted.
Like, could you take his blood, boil it, and drink it? Like,
see, these are the dangers, because someone like Sarah Langan is going to be like, "Come closer, young man. Let me see your delicious blood." But you pointed out the sinkhole. I think it's great that you said, "I don't know everything. I don't know everything about my work." I was listening to the artist, musician Regina Spektor had fielded the question the same way, and yeah, it was great when she said, like, yeah, like I don't I'm not totally aware of everything in my process, and I'm not aware of everything that goes there. And that's such a yeah, it's such a fantastic thing to hear as an artist or as a fan. And I think that's going on right. It's going on with the sinkhole because I had a feeling that the sinkhole might be meant to be right. It's this part. It's this global warming. You're talking about global warming. You're talking about the science. It's in science today. I think a sinkhole just opened up in some hospital grounds, just like happens in your book. Yet the name of the series is Nighttime Logic. So I think that there's the daytime aspect of the sinkhole, which is like, yeah, science, global warming, this is real, this is causing anxiety. And yet the sinkhole is also operating in what I'm calling, yeah, that nighttime part of the story. Like, okay, we got Disney's the black hole, and there's the sinkhole, and we don't really know where it comes from, and we don't know how it got back. So it is also operating, at least to this reader, as that nighttime part of the story.
Well, I think when that kind of stuff happens, you realize that we're not in control. You know, the Earth is bigger than us. You know, and it gets very existential pretty fast.
Um, yeah, one more question along those lines before I think you're going to read from Good Neighbors for us. There's another funny you should say existential or an existential part of the story, just a mind blowing part of the story. You do have the present story, and we do have parts of it that go back in time and little excerpts forward in time. There's one part where Rhea talks about this concept she calls the inverse panopticon.
Yeah.
And just keep that away from the guy with magic mushrooms because yeah, that's such a or give it to him right away. Can you talk about the inverse panopticon? I mean, I feel like it's such a fascinating notion to me.
Well, I think, you know, the panopticon is like there's a guard in the center and of a tower, and the prisoners are all around, and everyone feels they're being watched at some point. So they always act as if they're being watched and regulate their judgment accordingly. And that never made like a ton of sense to me. You know, I feel like once you kind of would probably stop paying attention after a while and be like, they're watching me, it's fine. But How to Get Ahead in Advertising. Did you ever see that movie?
I don't think I've seen it.
Well, it's Richard Grant gives this. He's an advertising executive who grows like a second head.
Oh my!
And the head becomes a monster, and it's like, you know, it's what is advertising? Sell people stuff they don't need and make them miserable. You know, make them feel like they're no good unless they have it. So this you know, alter ego rises up and makes this psychotic speech at the end that's also true. And he's like, it was never. Big Brother was never what was threatening to us, which I think is also the panopticon. It's we are watching Big Brother. And like I feel like that's what the reverse panopticon is it's like we are so alienated that that we're happy to watch Big Brother. We're happy to have something to talk about. And I feel like on Maple Street, you have this cul-de-sac, and they're like, Jesus, let's have something in common. Let's hate the wilds. Let's just all watch the wilds.
So you're going to read for us from Good Neighbors. You want to set it up? What are you going to read from?
My question is, how long should I read for?
You can read as long as you'd like. Just give me a heads up when pause and look at the camera and say, and that's it. So I know to switch us back and switch my mic back on. But yeah, read. We've got some good time. So read how are you feeling?
I will read the first chapter. How's that?
That sounds great. All right. So here is Sarah Langan reading the first chapter of Good Neighbors. All right. Let's switch it over. Let's take it over to you now.
Okay. So the hardcover just came in. Yay! And I will show you. There's a couple of excerpts and newspaper articles that I'm going to skip. The Strangers Part 1 I'm skipping, but this is the map, which is super cool. And then this is the inventory of characters. You would think I'd know how to use a phone, but clearly not. Okay, and this is just the opening of the book. So I think we've talked enough about it that I can just start. 116 Maple Street, Sunday, July 4. Is it a party? Are we invited? Larry Wilde asked. They weren't invited. Gertie Wilde knew this, but she didn't want to admit it. So she watched the crowd out her window, counted all the people there. Gertie and her family had moved to 116 Maple Street about a year before. They'd bought the place, a fixer-upper, for cheap. They'd meant to renovate, to reshingle the roof and put in new gutters, tear up the deep pile carpet, and nail down bamboo. At the very least, they'd planned to seed grass across the patchwork lawn. But stuff happens or doesn't happen. The inside of 116 Maple Street was haphazard, too. As a kid, you might have visited this sort of home on a play date and intuited the mess as happy but also chaotic. You had a great time when you slept over. You never worried about the stuff you had to bother with at home. Making your bed, hanging your wet towel, carrying your dishes to the sink. Still, you wanted to go home pretty soon after, because even with the laughter, all that mess started to make you nervous. You got the feeling that the management was in over its head. Maple Street was a tight-knit, crescent-shaped block that bordered a 6-acre park. The people there dressed for work in business casual. They drove practical cars to practical jobs. They were always in a rush, even if it was just to the grocery store or church. They didn't seem to worry as much about their mortgages. If their parents were sick or their marriages weren't happy, they didn't mention it. They channeled those unsettled feelings, like everything else, into their kids. They talked about extracurriculars and sports, which teachers at the local Blue Ribbon Public School were brilliant miracle workers, and which ones lacked training via the social emotional connection. They were obsessed with college, Harvard in particular. The Wildes were different. With their finances out of sorts, Gertie and Arlo didn't have the bandwidth to obsess over their kids. And even if they'd had the time and mental space, no one had ever taught them about creative learning and emotional intelligence, healthy discipline, and consistent boundaries. They wouldn't have known where to begin. The kids, Julia and Larry, made fart sounds in public and also farted in public. Julia was fast. Their first month on the block, she stole her dad's cigarettes and taught the neighborhood rat pack how to French exhale. Larry was quirky. He didn't make eye contact and had a flat affect. When he thought the other kids weren't looking, he stuck his hands down his pants. The Wildes knew that they'd been breaking tacit rules ever since arriving on Maple Street. But they didn't know which rules. For instance, Arlo was a former rocker who smoked late-night parliaments off his front porch. He didn't know that in the suburbs, you only smoke in your backyard, especially if you have tattoos and no childhood friends to vouch for you. Otherwise, you look angry, puffing all alone and on display. You vibe violent. Then there was Gertie. Before she met Arlo at the Atlantic City Convention Center, where he played lead guitar for an in-house band, she'd won 32 regional beauty pageants. Like a living Barbie doll, she still conducted herself with that same pageant training. Phony smiles, over-bright eyes, stock answers to questions that begged for honesty. The neighbors who tried to befriend her had mostly given up, under the misapprehension that there wasn't anybody home underneath all that blonde. Worse, nobody'd ever told Gertie that mom cleavage isn't cool. She didn't know that when she wore her halter tops, painted gold chain necklaces dangling between her breasts, she might as well have been waving a great banner to the other wives that read, "Insecure floozy who wants to steal your husband and make your kids ashamed you're not 5'10" blonde Viking with perfect skin." That summer of the sinkhole was the hottest on record. Because the center of Long Island was as concave as a red blood cell, there weren't any mitigating winds. Just mosquitoes and crickets and living, singing things. The smell was salt water sifted through 2 ripe begonias. The Wild family had just finished dinner. Cheese toast washed down with fizzy water, Trader Joe's frozen cherries for dessert. They'd heard the sounds of people, but hadn't noticed anything special until the notes of a Nirvana song carried through their windows. I'm not like you. I'm not like them, but I can pretend. Is it a party? Are we invited? 8-year-old Larry asked. He lifted Robot Boy from his lap. Nobody was allowed to call it a doll or he got embarrassed. Gertie hoisted herself to the window and pulled back the thin curtains. She was 24 weeks pregnant, so everything she did took a few extra seconds, especially in this heat. It was 7 o'clock exactly, and everybody out there seemed to have gotten the same memo, because they were carrying quinoa salad in Tupperware, or chips and salsa, or a sixer of artisanal beer. Gertie quick counted. The Colliers, the Lombards, Simpsons, Grady's, Gluskins, Mullers, Chuns, Harrisons, Sings, Pullens, Walshes, Hesches, Schroeder's, Benchleys, Ottomanellis, Atlases, and Pontes. Every house on Maple Street was accounted for. Every house except 116, the Wild House. Is it a party? Rhea Schroeder would have... If it was a party, Rhea Schroeder would have told me, Gertie muttered. 12-year-old Julia lifted a single blonde eyebrow. She wasn't pretty like her mom, and had decided early to contrast this by being funny. Looks like a party. Smells like a party. Arlo poked his head next to Gertie's, and together they leaned. He was wearing just a Hanes t-shirt and cut-off Levi's, his sleeve-inked arms exposed. On the left, Frankenstein's monster and bride. On the right, Wolfman and the mummy. Gertie was bad at reaching out, at asking. But he was a warm person who'd always intuited when she needed to be reassured. He kissed the top of her head. Fun, he said. Should we go? I'm game for a second dinner, she answered. Got these growing bones today, I think. I don't understand. How is this not a party? Larry called from behind. Sounds like a party, Julie said. It was a party, Gertie finally admitted. So why hadn't anybody posted about it on the Maple Street web group? Was Rhea Schroeder mad at her? It was true they'd fallen out of contact lately. But that was because Gertie was exhausted most nights. This third baby was heck on her body. And Rhea's summer course load was full. Plus she had those 4 kids. It had to be an accident that she hadn't been invited. Rhea would never intentionally do her wrong. She should have expected a 4th of July party. She should have asked around. For all she knew, the neighbors had come up with the idea only this morning. There hadn't been time to post about it. Besides, you don't need a written invitation to a block party. Do you? Just then, Queen Bee Rhea Schroeder passed by their window. She was overdressed in a fancy Eileen Fisher linen pantsuit, white and stainless. Rhea! Gertie called through the open window, her voice stage loud, reverberating all through the street and into the giant park. Hi, sweetie, how are you? Then she waved, big and pageant winning. Rhea looked straight into Gertie's window, into Gertie's eyes. The attachment between them felt wrong, like a plug connected to a faulty socket, sparks flying. For just a moment, Gertie was terrified. Rhea turned. Dom? Steve? Did someone bring chicken? Or do I need to make a Whole Foods run? Her voice faded as she walked deeper into the park. That was weird, Arlo said. She's spacey. Smart people are like that. She probably didn't see me, Gertie answered. Needs to get her eyes checked, Arlo joked. She sucks chocolate balls. So does her whole family. They're all ball suckers, Julia said. Gertie turned, hands resting on her full belly like a shelf. That's terrible to say, Julia. We're lucky that people like the Schroeders even talk to us. Rhea's a college professor. You're not giving little Shelley a hard time, are you? She's too sensitive for that. Sensitive? She's a crazy bitch, Julia said. Don't say that, Gertie cried back. The window's open. They'll hear. Julia hung her head, revealing strong shoulders knotted with pubescent acne eruptions. Sorry. That's better, Arlo said. We can't be fighting with the All-Americans. You gotta be nice to these people. Make it work for your own good. Totally, Gertie said. Should we see what all the fuss is about? No, it's too hot. Larry and I'd rather sit in the basement and eat paint like sad, neglected babies, Julie answered. Her normally curly wild ponytail had gone limp. Let paint taste sweet. That's why babies eat it, Larry announced. Paint's not really your option too here, Arlo answered, as Gertie started for the kitchen, where she grabbed a half-eaten bag of Ruffles potato chips to offer the crowd. Then he leaned over the table, his voice soft. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't not threatening. There's no option two. Get the fuck on and slap on some smiles. Should we go? Gertie asked. Of course, Arlo answered, his voice soft and nice now that Gertie was back. He opened the front door. The wild parents took the lead, then the kids, who followed closely. Maybe it was coincidence, and maybe it wasn't. But a few feet out, someone switched the music to a song in minor key. It was Kennedy's in the River, Arlo's number 18 Billboard hit single from 2012. Don't know what love is. Don't think it matters. I got $60 and a dream that won't shatter. I'm not singing that. Arlo blushed. Hearing his own music was a complicated thing. His family knew this. As a result, Larry and Julia walked slower, like their feet had short shackles between them. Gertie held a smile tight as a zipper. One step after the other, they arrived at Sterling Park. Cy Singh and Nikita Kaur glanced up from the barbecue. OxyContin-addled Iraq war veteran Peter Benchley ran his fingers along the tender edges of his residual limbs. The gang of kids, self-named the Rat Pack, stopped jumping on the big trampoline someone had wheeled to the center of the park. Shouting something too distant to hear, Shelley Schroeder pointed straight at Julia. The vibe wasn't hostile. After all her pageant training, Gertie was good at reading a room, and she knew that. But something had changed since the last barbecue on Memorial Day, because the vibe wasn't welcoming either. She tried to catch Ria's eye, but Ria was busy talking to Linda Andamanelli. There were people everywhere, any one of whom she could have approached, but during her time on Maple Street, Gertie'd only ever felt comfortable with Ria. You're heavy under me and above, crying in cemeteries, like it's love. Arlo's song kept going. Shoulders hunched, the Wilds played captive to a low-class history they couldn't hide from. I see my dad and you, all sweat and junk. Baby, run away with me. We'll shake these blues. At last, Fred Atlas and his sickly wife Bethany picked their way across the crowd to greet them. Dude, you made it, Fred called as he clapped Arlo on the back. Then they went in for the bro hug. Bethany offered Gertie a winsome smile, her body brittle as a straw man's. The Atlas's dog, a rescue German shepherd named Ralph, nudged the whole group of them, trying to keep them safe and in the pack. You're the vajizzle, Fred. You too, Bethany, Arlo answered. Then he and Fred took orders and went to the drinks table. Over by the kids, Dave Harrison disconnected from the Rat Pack. He slid off the trampoline and jogged to Julia and Larry, handing each a sparkler. They lit them, and Julia wrote sharp in the air while Larry made circles. Can I have a burger? Gertie asked Linda Andamanelli on the table where many American flags on toothpicks, which on the flag were many American flags on toothpicks, which people had stabbed into their sesame seed buns. Linda took a second, eyes focused on the burgers, even though it was clear she'd heard. Gertie waited, still and tall. Wondered if she should have worn a shawl over her low-cut dress. But pregnancy was the only time her boobs got to be D-cups. It was fun to show them off. Cheese or plain? Linda asked at last. Plain. You're such a trooper to cook in this heat. I can't help it. I love making people happy. I'm just that kind of person. It could be 150 degrees and I'd still do this. It's my nature. I'm too nice. I noticed that about you, Gertie offered, which was not true. She'd never noticed much of anything about Linda Andamanelli, except that she was the kind of woman who wore a fanny pack to the grocery store and who got her politics from the social network. She got the rest of her opinions from Ria Schroeder, whose words she treated like gospel. Linda sighed like a martyr. You must be hungry. I was always hungry when I was pregnant. I mean, I was carrying twins. But maybe you're not hungry because you're so skinny. I hate you for being skinny. How are you so skinny? You're like an alien. Gertie bit into the burger. Juice ran down her chin and then her cleavage. I'm just medium skinny if you don't count the baby. I used to be really skinny, but it's too hard. You can't eat bread. Linda's grin flickered. One time, I cut out carbs and dairy together, plus I did this high-intensity interval training. You could do that if you wanted. I still have some of the books. Thanks, Linda said. Over by the trampoline, Julia and Larry started jumping with the rest of the Rat Pack kids. And at the drinks table, Arlo was telling a story to a whole bunch of guys. Something about the clerk at the 7-Eleven who made everybody late for their trains because he was so bad at making change. I just gave up. I said, take it, you rich bastard. Arlo drawled, then popped his Parliament light into the corner of his mouth and made an air fist. His voice was louder than everybody else's, and they were standing back to get away from the smoke, even Fred. Pretty soon, everybody was laughing from that first beer or wine and clapping and retelling some story from work or what cute and mischievous thing their kids had done in their kindergarten class that had left the teacher flabbergasted. The Gradys, Mullers, Pullens, and Gluskins were planning a trip to Montauk. Margie and Sally Walsh were explaining how Subarus aren't really lesbian cars, they're just practical. The Ponte men compared bicep size. They were in ripping spirits, having come straight from the town baseball league's end-of-year keg party. Food and second rounds began. The heat stayed thick. At last, Gertie summoned her courage. She found Ria Schroeder by her famous German potato salad. The secret ingredient came by way of her mother-in-law from Munich, Miracle Whip. Hi, Gertie said. I saw you before, but I don't think you saw me, so hi again. Ria frowned. She'd been doing that a lot lately. Probably she was stressed out. Between the 4 kids and the full-time job, who wouldn't be? Has it really been since spring? I miss our talks. Gertie willed her eyes to meet Ria's. Want to come over next week? Arlo will make his pesto chicken. I know you like that. Ria seemed to consider, but then, I'm so busy at work. They can't spare me. I'm practically holding up the entire English department. Plus, I've been planning things like this, barbecues. I really don't have a second. Gertie stepped closer, which wasn't her nature. She liked a wide swath of personal space. But for the sake of this new life, she and Arlo were trying so hard to make work. For the sake of her friendship with this smart, funny woman, she pushed past her comfort zone. Her voice quivered. Did I do something? I know you planned these things. I'm sure it was an accident that you didn't invite us. Ria affected surprise. Accident? No accident at all. Then she walked, white linen swishing over heels just high enough to keep the grass from staining. With Rod's straight posture and a cement smile, Gertie watched her disappear into the crowd. The party continued, and it was stupid. Pregnancy hormones. But she had to trace her index fingers along her under eyes to keep the mascara from running. That's when it happened. The music cut to static. The earth rocked. Linda's red-checked picnic table with all those burgers started to shake. Gertie felt the vibrations from her feet to her teeth. Early fireworks? Earthquake? Shooter? There wasn't time to find out. Gertie did a quick take of the park, met Arlo's eyes. They fast-walked to the kids from opposite directions. Like magnets, the 4 snapped together. Street? Gertie shouted. Home! Arlo shouted. They hoofed it, running along the thick clovers and dandelions, past the trampoline and hem of pudding stone that bordered the park. With her pregnancy and bad feet, Gertie brought up the rear. She didn't see the sinkhole as it opened, only watched later from the footage people captured with their phones. What she noticed most was how hungry it seemed. The picnic table and all those burgers fell inside. The barbecue followed. Ralph, the German shepherd, got away from Fred and Bethany, banking the sinkhole's lips as they swelled. A surprised yelp, and Ralph was gone. By the time Gertie looked back, the hole had reached an uneasy peace with Maple Street. It had stopped growing, leaving just the people. Some had run, Some had stayed frozen. Some had even hastened toward that widening gyre, their instincts all messed up. And then there was Rhea Schroeder. In the stillness, she didn't turn to her family, whom she deftly rescued and corralled to the far side of the sinkhole. She didn't pet their hair or check in with her spouse like so many others did. She didn't cry or gawk or take out her phone, no. She looked straight at Gertie and bared her teeth. Between them, a gritty smoke rose up. It carried with it the chemical scent of something unearthed. So that's that.
Okay. Chapter 1 from Good Neighbors. Fantastic. Before we move on to the second half of the program, I'm just going to make a couple of announcements. Thank you for that excellent reading. You're watching. What's that?
Do I get a quick break?
Sure. I'll take a quick break. I'll go solo screen, and then we'll come back with you after that.
All right, cool.
I did my break while you were reading.
Okay.
Okay, Sarah's going to take a quick break while I make these announcements here. So yeah, thanks to Sarah for giving that great reading. Thanks for Sarah for joining us. You're watching on the YouTube channel. This is where we'll have all the future nighttime logic events. You can tune in just here. If you want to hit subscribe, that's a thing to do. Also, you can check out the rest of the content that's on the channel. The most recently was the 6 nights of the New York Ghost Story Festival in December. And Sarah read from Audrey's Door, one of those nights, her third novel. Also, we have an account on Ko-Fi or Ko-fi, KOFI.com, Nighttime Logic. This is a not-profit venture, so if you just want to make a donation or just throw a tip, you can do that over at Nighttime Logic on Ko-Fi. The next event that's coming up is on January 30th, 2021. It will be we have a Facebook page for it, and it will be here on this channel. I'll be talking with Gwendolyn Keist. We're going to be, the event is called Underworld Dreams in Conversation. So Gwendolyn and I will be talking about our recent releases. We'll be talking about the audiobook of my most recent collection of short stories called Underworld Dreams. And we'll be talking about Gwendolyn's latest novel, Bone Set and Feathers. So yeah, I'll ask Sarah when she comes back what appearances she has. Again, February 2nd, 2021 is when you can pick up Good Neighbors. And Sarah is now back on camera, or she's getting ready to come back. Your sound is...
I'm plugging in my phone. It's running out of juice.
Oh, okay. All right. Are you back with us? No worries. I just wanted to add, I made some announcements I wanted to add before we move on to the second half here. I just wanted to ask, do you have any appearances coming up that you wanted to announce or share with us? Where's your next appearance where people can see you or hear you?
Mysterious Galaxy, February 1st. I'm doing with the actor Hilary Burton. She's also promoting her book, and we're fans of each other, so we're going to do a joint thing in conversation. That's the night before the book comes out. Then February 2nd, Grady Hendrix is gracious enough to be interviewing me for at Novel Bookstore in Memphis. And I also have a couple of other bookstores that I'll be reading at or doing conversations with, including, what's the big one in Huntington?
Oh, Book Review.
Yes.
All right.
With Victor Laval. And
fantastic.
Yeah.
Is that going to be in person, or is that going to be online only? these?
It's all going to be online,
Right.
unfortunately. But so I have a whole bunch of, I have maybe 10 events that are all going to be, I'm doing an LA one with my friend Sarah Haskins, who wrote Booksmart, and she was the showrunner for Carol's Second Act. She's being sweet, and she's going to interview me at Book Soup in LA. And there's a big one that I can't really announce yet. That's
Okay.
in March. So.
All right. When where can we tune in? Where can someone tune in to get all these in one place? Would that be at your website to get all these listed, or just your social media? Watch from there.
I have it in my events in my websites. That's sarahlangan.com. And then you can also sign up for my mailing list, because then you'll get all the information.
And how do you sign up for that? Is that on the mailing list on the webpage too?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's February 1st, if I'm not mistaken, at Mysterious Galaxy, and that's going to be an online only. And then February 2nd, Novel Bookstore in Memphis with Grady Hendrix. And then you've got one. I have to say, I'm not a fan of Book Review in Huntington. They're not nice to indie people, but Victor Laval is fantastic, and I'll be tuning in to support you two guys, you two people for that event there. Okay, and February, like we said, February 2nd is the launch date for the novel. So I mentioned while you were on break that people could tune in to some other content on this YouTube channel. One of the pieces of content was the New York Ghost Story Festival, which was so cool to have you. And I think we had our friends Douglas Wynn and Lee Thomas and others, awesome writers. And you read from Audrey, your third novel, Audrey's Door, that night. So you've written. We've talked a lot about the new novel, but you've got the three other novels out there, and a ton of excellent short stories. I want to ask you about about those stories. I think you might even be reading from one of them for us before we go. But I wanted to ask you about Audrey's Door. It's been a while since that book came out. I always revisit it. To someone who, I know there are some people who are, I've been recommending the book since the Ghost Story Festival, and there's some people who are going to be tuning into Audrey's Door for the first time. What can you tell someone who's new to your work if they want to pick up Audrey's Door and check it out before they check out Good Neighbors?
Well, I hadn't looked at it since, maybe the year after it had been published, but before I read it for.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I like this book. This is pretty good.
It holds up. It doesn't hold up. It's awesome. It's literally one of my favorite books. It's so good.
Thanks. So that was actually, thank you, because I don't know, I tend, unless it was successful or I get a lot of feedback, I'm like, well, there's a reason nobody's talking about it. And that didn't do well sales wise.
What? Wow.
So, but it's about a woman who is haunted in her life by her past, and she can't really let it go. And she's living with a man that she actually loves, and he proposes, and she's like, yes, obviously, and this is the direction I want my life to take, but she can't do it. And I think there's so many times I feel like that's a very universal thing where what the right thing is and the thing you want to do, but you can't, for whatever reason, it's too scary. So she leaves him, and she has no money. So she winds up at this apartment building where the tenants want her to move in because there's something about her that the building is attracted to. It's called the Breviary, and it's haunted, and it haunts in very specific personal ways. And the previous occupant was an opera singer who murdered her children in the room that she winds up renting. And pretty much as soon as she's there, she knows she shouldn't be there, and she wants out. And it's like calamity after calamity for her trying to get a way out, and sort of having to figure things out. And the thing about her character is she's an architect, and the thing about the building is that it's a building founded on a religion called chaotic naturalism, and it's sort of a worship of anti-nature. So structures, I feel like Gaudi worships nature in his structures. Everything is both like kind of symmetrical, but also unexpected and what you'd find in nature. And chaotic naturalism is the opposite of that. And it was a religion that was founded like 100 years before. And there are these buildings where there's no Euclidean lines and nothing makes sense. And everything sort of is meandering, but also impossibly beautiful. And from a mathematic perspective, spectacular. So it attracts her. And the building wants her because she will be able to make it come to life.
Yeah, you gave a great in-depth. It's such a fun book. It's such a fascinating book. I often mention it. I mention it. I mention it in the context of weird fiction. I often say it's not only like my favorite weird fiction novel of recent times. It's just one of my favorite recent novels. Who and you also there's a lot there aren't the plethora of characters in Good Neighbors, but that there is an interesting cast of characters in this house. But it's all about Audrey. I mean, who is she, at the very start of the book? Who who is she, and what does she want, and how is her situation changed, or how does it start to be changed by the supernatural, which is this really unique haunted house?
Well, I think we all want, consciously we want rational things that make sense, and subconsciously we don't. And I think the breviary wakes up those parts of her that are destructive and that are angry, and that, when you have control over your id, don't come out. And it's kind of terrifying to her. But what also happens is it's that question of, is the ghost coming to you evil, or is it really the ghost? And I think that's kind of a question she has to answer, because she starts to imagine her own past, but also imagine her mother, who she has a very difficult relationship with. If you ever read, I think it's Mona Simpson's Anywhere But Here, like I felt like there were a lot of similarities in the same mother-daughter relationship, where the mother is mentally ill, but very loving of her daughter, but the damage is the damage, and it's the story of the daughter trying to get away from that, but how do you? So it's like it brings out her dark side.
Yeah. You mentioned the breviary. You mentioned that it's calling her. You mentioned that it brings out things in her. Even though it's a very different kind of book, um, in terms of just genre classification than Good Neighbors, do you see the house in Audrey's door and the sinkhole operating the same way on the characters?
I actually do not. I think it's a cool comparison, and but I was thinking about this, and I feel as if the breviary, whatever that is malignant. And I think Good Neighbors, whatever it is, it's human. And there's a rationalism to it, and there's a justification to it. Whereas something evil is just, there isn't anything to it. It wants bad. Whereas I don't think the sinkhole is that.
Okay. Yeah. Can you tell? Right. So maybe they're operating. Right. Maybe they're just operating in these these big places of darkness, but they're operating in very different ways in the book. One thing I wanted to ask you about is in the spoiler warning for Audrey's door here, but in the climax or near the end of the book, there is a place where Audrey actually she reaches and enters this door. What do you think were the expectations at that point, or the reader expectations? And can you actually tell us what happens in that climactic scene? Because I think it's so cool, and how expectations worked with that scene.
Hard to remember how I ended it.
Well, you can pass it over to me if you need to punt.
um, that's a tough, like, I've always wondered if that was the right, I think it was the right ending. Like,
I think to this reader it was, yeah.
yeah, I think you could have said, if you did the movie version of it, okay, so what happens in it, and you should close your ears because it is the end of this, it's a spoiler, but she builds this door, and this is the breviary has been compelling her to build the door the whole time, and it's all the tenants have been wanting this. They're like the insane tenants of Rosemary's Baby, or and so they think they're going to go to some amazing place through the door, and it's like, no, hell comes out and it eats you, and that's what the door is. So hell starts coming out, and it's funny, like, to me. But for Audrey, I I did an adaptation of it that I think I would change now for film. And it was that she learns her lesson by killing Sora, because you have to kill something you love to make the door open, right? And but she doesn't do that. She sort of overcomes it, and she and Sora get out together, and that's the start of their life. And the horror version is she kills him, but then she's comes to her senses and is the one who escapes, right? And he lets her go. But I think the way I did it was actually the right way to do it. Because that's what the story is about. It's about, like, what is can love overcome tragedy?
It's a really compelling ending and a really compelling scene in there. Yeah, we'll leave it at that because, yeah, highly recommend people while you're waiting for Good Neighbors, check out Audrey's Door. And it's just it's so fun. It's just such a cool haunted house. I mean, haunted houses are such a potent setting. Maybe even their own subgenre. What are some of your favorite haunted houses in film or in media?
Well, I think Hill House, is great. The Shining. I don't really think that's a haunting. I think it's more the same thing as Audrey's Door, where it's a malevolence, as opposed to Hill House, which is like, maybe it's Eleanor. In fact, it's Eleanor. But those are great. I think those are the history. When I was a kid, I watched. Did you ever see The Uninvited? Like, PBS used to play that like every weekend. Channel 13.
Yeah, I think I did. Maybe I'm thinking of something else with a different name, but what is The Uninvited?
Oh, so this woman moves to a house, or I don't know, her boyfriend lives in or something, but it's like a family house, and she's always hearing crying in it, and
Oh, okay.
something keeps driving her to run off. It's like probably Cornwall or something, off the cliffs into the ocean, but she keeps not doing it, and they discover that it's a ghost. And at first they think it's the ghost of there's one ghost crying, and there's one ghost that's like appearing and super mad, and it's two moms, which is really
Mm,
fun.
mm. Sounds like such a cool one. I wanna turn back to our discussion of genre. Yeah, you started out. You wanted to tell people, oh, okay, Good Neighbors. Good Neighbors isn't horror. Or It's not the horror you might be expecting. I want to talk about one of my favorite short stories of yours, and possibly through that lens. It's a story, Burn Victim, which is out here in the wonderful Shivers 5 from Cemetery Dance. Uh, there's a lot I could say about that story, but the one thing that it occurred to me while we were talking, it could be said that this is a story. So Burn Victim is a story in a horror anthology. Okay, it's Shivers, it's Cemetery Dance, but like, rhetorical question, like, why is Burn Victim horror and why not, right? So, like, in Burn Victim, it's a story of a trip through the desert where a young lady and her boyfriend, they pick up a hitchhiker who is basically an escaped mental patient with serious wounds. But there isn't overtly anything supernatural happening in the story.
I don't know. I mean, like,
So,
I like whoever will publish me.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I yes, that's the easy answer. I mean, I always try to find an answer. Like, okay, yeah. I mean, there's different kinds of horror, right? There's supernatural horror, and then there's no um, there's non-supernatural horror. And I guess the point I wanted to making is that the we don't, I would submit um, that there's the Jack Ketchum school of horror, like that you don't need. There doesn't need to be a supernatural element in horror, and often uh, some of the most uh, some of the most gripping stories are those stories, um, supernatural or not, where we see those relationships between the people, and they are disturbing or
Yeah.
enlightening.
I mean, Dallas's stuff was some of the most horrific stuff I've ever read, and you could easily call it true crime. In fact, if yeah,
Yeah, most of and a lot of it was either ripped from the headlines or the inspiration was ripped there. Maybe a couple more questions about your short stories, but you're up for reading from one of your latest for us?
sure,
Okay, yeah. Is this going to be The Prettiest Mask from Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet?
yes, it is.
Okay, yeah. I guess before we launch into it, the other contender that I want to put out there for uh, people looking to get their fix of Sarah Langan while you're waiting for Good Neighbors, check out her novelette, The Night Nurse, as well, which you can find in the Best Horror of the Year, Volume 12, published by Ellen Datlow. It's a really cool story called The Night Nurse. Very witchy, very supernatural as well. But what can you tell us about The Prettiest Mask before you read from it?
Well, it has a story, which is that like a year and a half ago, I was in a producer's office, and he was like, "What do you have for me?" And I was like, "Well, all girls school, but it's like a post plague era, and and when they have their periods, like it's part of the culture that now they get masks, and they have bloody mask balls, and the masks have to be more and more innate and beautiful, except they've never entered this all girls private school because it's like Spence or something, and masks are slowly taking over the globe just for women, and the plague no longer exists, but women are being forced into masks." And the producer was like, "Yes, this is the story." And I was like, "Great." And so I started writing it in like February, and I finished it in like April or May. And even then, like, I was like, it's anti-mask, but it's not anti-COVID mask.
Important, important distinction. Important distinction. Okay, and that
it's
producer.
anti. All right. So, yeah. So that part was like, I'd finished it, and we're all like, this is pretty. It's like a really good story. I'm gonna toot my own horn and be like, this is really pretty good. It was like a breakthrough, and then it was like, the producer was like, I cannot buy this.
Oh.
There's no way. And like all these Hollywood people were like, love it. What else do you have? And I was like, it's hard to write things. I can't just. So
Right.
Anyway.
I was going to ask, my next question was this producer's name Gavin Grant? No. but
No,
looks like
Gavin was like, I was so glad. I mean, and publishing people were like, yeah, we want to publish this, which was great because they could have been scared about it. Because like the Locust review was like, I don't know. What is this? Like, is it anti-mask? I don't know. And I'm like, I just wrote it before. So
all right. So what are you gonna read from the beginning or in progress part of it? What are we gonna hear?
This is what it looks like, and I'm just gonna read the first chapter because it's a short novel, and it was published, the same excerpt that was published in LitHub, where it's still
great. And give me a heads up when you come to the conclusion. And here is Sarah Langan reading from The Prettiest Mask.
Sorry. So chapter 1 of You Have the Prettiest Mask. I became a mean girl. The summer before plague masks took over the Chauncey School for Girls, my whole world kind of gasped. Everything suddenly got really slow and nervous. It was that moment that happens right before the scream. The world in general, and not just my world, was a dumpster fire. You couldn't tune into a stream without hearing bad news. Between the Y plague and the weird parties that parents were throwing for their daughters when they turned 13, I was stressed out, nervous even. Unless I was with my best friend Pamela Zentris, I was hiding in my room, pretending none of it was happening. I'd fold my clothes and put things in proper places for hours. Then the next day I'd do the same thing. And then the next day I'd move the furniture. And then my personal bad news happened. Pamela told me she was going away all summer. Her parents had rented a cabin in Ontario to get away from all the noise. I knew she didn't mean traffic noise. New Yorkers like traffic noise. She meant the streams and radios tuned to NPR and the screens that flickered wherever you wandered, if you were brave enough to wander outside. The problem was that Pamela and I had been besties since kindergarten. I was a penguin of a person. I picked one friend, and then that friend was the only person I cared about. I friended for life. I came to her house the day she left. Is it because of me? I asked her mom. I promised I'd be nicer, and I'd stop distracting Pamela from homework when we teamed up for projects, and I'd stop dropping F-bombs when I didn't think she was listening. I'd stop eating so many groceries when I was over her house, and I was really sorry about those Pringles last time. It was just that my mom was always on a diet, and we never had good food. Then I was crying, and Pamela was crying, and her mom hugged us both and promised it wasn't about groceries. She lifted my chin with her finger like I was a little kid and not a 12-year-old. It's not about you. We love you, Kathy, she said. And then even Pamela's mom looked kind of weepy. And I got the feeling there was something she didn't love when she told me that. But you don't ask adults questions when they flash those expressions. You just guess. Like, maybe she didn't like my parents, and the whole trip was to get away from them. Or maybe it was that she didn't like her apartment because it smelled like curry and mice from the Chinese restaurant downstairs. Or maybe it was the plague masks. Pretty soon after that, I was curbside, hugging them goodbye as they drove for Honey Harbor, Ontario. The first few days were total wash. I sat around staring at walls, then literally washing the walls with bleach because it's awful when you notice a greasy handprint. And once you clean it away, you notice that the spot you made is brighter than the rest. It's uneven, and you need to make it even. I spent a lot of time doing weird stuff like that because that was the summer that outside stopped being safe for girls like me. I also drew intricate mazes and hung them on my walls, like crazy intricate. At night, when I was trying to sleep, which always took a while, I'd imagine I was inside one of those mazes, working myself out. After a week without Pamela, I realized something strange. A part of me was relieved. Pamela and I were like sisters, and loyal like sisters. It didn't matter that we didn't have a lot in common. We trusted each other. But since Y Plague, we drifted. Her parents didn't allow streams, and they didn't allow screens. She didn't know things. She was innocent. On the day the first mask law passed in Louisiana, she'd been on a roof trying to get a tan in this giant surfer bathing suit that had covered half her arms and legs. I tried to tell her what was happening and why I was upset. And she just pulled the wilted cucumbers from over her eyes and said, "It's going to be okay. It won't come to New York. My parents promised. Want to dance?" Going to her house had been like leaving a funeral for a surprise party. You had to be like, "Oh, hey, great, yeah, let's do that extra credit biography on Mercy Otis Warren. Then we'll have a pillow fight while your mom bakes Toll House cookies. It'll be a nice change for me." Because when I left my house, my parents were literally screaming at each other, and half the women on the streets, including your building manager, were wearing plague masks. They were looking at me, but I couldn't tell if they were scowling or smiling or what. They were like ghost people. Your obliviousness isn't infuriating at all, and I absolutely don't feel like I'm about to explode. So I noticed this, that I felt a little more myself without Pamela around. At dinner that night, my dad told me to stop rearranging the furniture like a weirdo. He was sorry camp had been canceled, but I needed to be self-motivated. I needed to devise an alternate plan. He suggested I start texting girls like Irene Scott and Penny DuPont, girls whose parents were important. He said he liked Pamela, but I was sophisticated. I had potential. Pamela came from hippies. She didn't have good sense. She was basic. I was glad he thought I was sophisticated. I also felt I was sophisticated and that Pamela was basic. It was nice he'd noticed, when he so rarely noticed anything about me anymore. When I was little, we'd been close, like people glued together. Then Y Plague came along like a bucket of solvent, dissolving every bond between us. Now he was my submarine dad, popping up when I least expected to give annoying advice or criticize. The rest of the time, he hung out deep underwater, at work or with my little brother, whom he treated like the second coming of Jesus Christ. Irene Scott and Penny DuPont were not girls I liked. They were the opposite of cool. If our school had a caste system, the popular girls were the ones with superpowers, like from My Hero Academia. They could digest people outside their bodies like frogs, or open portals to new universes, or shoot fireballs. Me and Pamela were the normal people without powers. And Penny DuPont and Irene Scott were something worse than ordinary. Mashed potatoes, maybe. The kind without skins. Just that white crap. So no way. Still, my dad's suggestion gave me an idea. I was curious about the popular girls. I thought I might have something in common with them because lately I wanted to do mean things. I wanted to do crazy things, like run into traffic and scream at strangers. I wanted to flip over my family dinner table and tell everybody off. Maybe there was a hidden superpower inside me too. Y Plague had triggered it, and all I needed was the company of the cool people to set it free. So I texted 5 different girls and wrote the same thing to all of them. I want to get wasted. Nobody answered. Sometimes little dots showed up, like they were writing back, and then the dots went away. 20 minutes later, I was sweating from shame. I was in my tiny bedroom, door closed, air conditioning blasting, sweating and pacing like a confused zoo monkey. Were they all together right now? Were they shout laughing? Something like, "I always knew Kathy Lerner was weird. What a freak show." So I went back in. I wrote them all again. JK, not maybe, I wrote, which, I'm sure cleared it all up. Rhonda Pendeja texted back. I was holding the phone, and it was like it turned into hot wax. My hands freaked out at the sight of her name. I dropped the phone because maybe her name could see right through the glass. Maybe she was looking at me. Rhonda Pineda was the queen of our grade. She was also a psycho. By psycho, I don't mean that she stuffed her mom with formaldehyde and sat her in a rocker, though maybe. I mean shaking with cartoon rage if somebody sat in her special queen seat in the cafeteria, and once in a while, finding them in the hall and belting them. I mean mocking the underclassmen when they fetched her lunch wrong. It wasn't just other people that she hurt either. In fourth grade, right before Wide Plague lockdown, our teacher accused her of messing up her report on the Phantom toll booth. It got her so mad, she pulled out this loose baby tooth. And then she worked on the rest of her teeth over the course of the day until she had 4 baby teeth and her mouth was this gash of blood. By emotional health class, she was holding the teeth but trying to hide them, like they were evidence of something bad. Like it wasn't the fact that she'd yanked them that was the problem. It was the baby teeth. They were evil. In other words, Rhonda Pineda was not somebody you mess with. Hell yeah, let's get wasted, she texted. Only kidding, not really. You suck. I'm just joking. You fucking loser. This went on for a while, and I had no idea if she hated me or was making fun of me with a crowd of friends while I sat alone in my lame room with its weird mazes all over that I'd drawn with 000 005 micron pens. So I kept my answers neutral. Sure, yeah, I'm serious. JK, I know. I'm such a loser. We stopped texting. My phone went dark. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. I had this feeling while texting her, this alive feeling. Want to hang? Rhonda asked a few days later. Yes, absolutely. I wanted that so much. I texted back, whatever, why not? Smiley face, angry face, death face. Rhonda and this other popular girl, Lola Gibson, picked me up at my apartment. I didn't yet know to be embarrassed of my apartment, but I did know not to be embarrassed of my family, so I was waiting just inside the building, looking out when Rhonda's driver, Ivan, pulled up in a giant armored Mercedes van. I didn't talk the whole ride, didn't even ask where we were going. Lola and Rhonda were in the way back, so I took a seat in the middle row. Rhonda was tall and skinny with a really long nose, her features all angled, but not in a pretty way, which was weird because her mom literally used to be a supermodel. Lola was dark-skinned with big brown eyes and very curvy, like definitely a C-cup. Before Wide Plague, she'd always had boyfriends. Since she was Black, some people thought she was a scholarship student. This was weird for them to think because the girl was a fashion plate. She wore a Tiffany headband to school and her boots were handcrafted by a cobbler in Italy. Rhonda and Lola took a deep dive on how to build stream followings without posting nudes. Including my parents and extended family, I had 12 followers on my stream. Also, I had no boobs. Clearly, I had nothing to add to the conversation. So I sat there, facing forward. I had a feeling they'd forgotten about me, and I was afraid to remind them, in case it made them mad. The car stopped, and somebody opened the door for us. Since none of us had masks, they rushed us into this tall building on the Upper East Side. A plaque inside said Club Tourniquet. The walls were all dark wood, and it smelled both old and clean, like the Guggenheim. We took an elevator to a lounge with red velvet couches, where people worked on screens. Some were adults, others our age, doing homework or whatever. I followed Rhonda and Lola past that to the stairs in the back that led to a small restaurant and bar. At first, I didn't know why I felt so happy, why my chest felt like it was twice as deep, and the air was twice as sweet, and for once, I didn't want to mentally rearrange all the furniture like a Tetris game. Why, despite being with these scary, sophisticated girls, I felt so comfortable. But then I figured it out. Not a single girl or woman was wearing a mask. Not even the bartender or waitstaff or hostess. This place, these walls, were safe. Is it always like this? I asked. And Rhonda and Lola looked at me like maybe I was a moron. Like, what the fuck? You've literally never been here before? A whole bunch of Chance kids were at this giant table beside the bar, and Rhonda and Lola joined them. They didn't wave for me to follow, and they took the last 2 empty seats. I followed anyway. Life was happening here. The real shit was going down. Well, I'd been wasting time eating Pringles at Pamela Zenter's house. I didn't care if they didn't like me. For this, I'd make them like me. I stood there, right behind Rhonda. Compared to the rest of them in designer everything, my outfit was bad. Who's she? The sophomore across from Rhonda asked, her chin pointed at me. Except I knew her. Her little sister was a grade below, and I'd been to her brownstone twice for playdates. Rhonda grinned this tight, closed-lipped grin. My heart split lengthwise with terror. She's our loser shield. If somebody tries to talk to us, we can throw her at them. Her smelly douche powers will neutralize them. Everybody except for purple-haired Lola started laughing. Lola gave me this look like, say something. Here's what they didn't know. The price of being here was worth being teased. I was totally cool with it. Sure, I said. Point me at him. I'd be happy to. They liked that. They all started laughing, like I was in on the joke with them. Rhonda's angry grin turned into a real one. I brought you here, and that makes you my slave. Go tell my mom to fuck herself, slave, she said. Your wish is my command, master, I said, and then everyone, even Rhonda, was howling. Where is she? I asked. The laughter got even louder. Rhonda pulled the chair from a nearby table and pointed for me to sit. Forget it, she said, another time. And then I was with them, talking and laughing like one of them, like it belonged in their club, like I was one of the safe people who would survive this, who would come out the other side unbroken. I hung out with Rhonda and Lola every day after that. Once I was in her circle, Rhonda was nice. She saved her mean for everybody else. Lola was smart, and not in a book way. She understood how people worked and what made them act the way they did. People assumed she was mean because she was so serious and because her best friend was Rhonda, but it wasn't true. One-on-one, she was gentle as a kitten. We confided in each other that summer and spent late nights talking. In the dark, one time, Lola told us with this delighted grin that she wasn't a virgin. The boy was a secret. I felt awed by that. Scared, too. We went to each other's houses and did all the things you're not allowed to do at 12, but you do anyway, like sneaking into the liquor cabinet and then showing each other how fun it is to straddle the arm of a wingback chair. I felt myself, the real me, a person with rougher edges than I'd ever been allowed to show Pamela. I re-penguined, this time with 2 girls instead of 1. I'd been worried, but my submarine dad surfaced long enough to approve of Rhonda and Lola. He said that while they seemed wild, Chance girls always pulled it together by graduation. Girls with their pedigrees had too many safety nets to fall very far. He told me not to feel bad about Pamela, who had no idea that I was going to drop her on day 1 of 7th grade. He said it was inevitable. I needed to spread my wings. Pamela had been holding me back. At the end of lower school, you're never the same person you used to be, and it's nobody's fault, he'd said. But it was absolutely my fault. I hunted it down like a wild boar. We went to this school called Chance, and all girls on the Upper East Side with the motto, Know Thyself. It cost $73,000 a year, not including the bus, hot lunch, or after school. Most Chance girls started in kindergarten and were expected to stay until college, when we matriculated to the Ivy League or Wesleyan if we were weird. I was weird. I drew mazes and needed my clothes to never have tags or else my skin felt like it was burning and stuff like that. But I knew enough to keep my weird hidden. I never acted like that at Chance or with Pamela or even with Rhonda and Lola. I saved it all up and then spewed it once I got home in my room. I contained it there like a smelly pet hamster. The Chance brochure made our education look like some kind of love fest, where we sat around and laughed while making mud pies and practicing yoga. Children can only learn when they're happy, Chance boasted. The rest comes naturally. That's why Chance girls score in the top percentiles of every standardized test exam, including the SAT. But none of it was fun. All of it was work. We didn't just get graded in math, science, history, and literature. We got graded in pottery, and we got graded in how well we meditated. We got graded in whether we could shoot a basket and whether we were good at sharing our feelings during class-wide council. So we made up our feelings, and when we were waxing especially dramatic, we even cried while telling them. We pretended our dogs were dead, or our adopted sisters were dead, or our imaginary friends were real but also dead. My guess was that most Chance parents loved their daughters. They wanted us to be happy, so long as we also did everything they told us to do. I mean, they hadn't paid the big bucks for life's simple joys. If they wanted us to play in the mud and eat organic, they'd have sent us to the Rudolf Steiner Waldorf. They'd sent us to John's for connections, theirs and our own. Our job was to train in the language of the upper class, to look adults in the eye when we shook their hands, to make incisive jokes tinted with sarcasm, but not cruelty, to look pretty and get straight A's, to never confess to studying, to always make it look easy, like something we'd naturally been born with, something impossible to acquire unless they knew the secrets of the ruling class. As a scholarship kid, it was my job to learn from and pass for the ruling class chance girl, to hide what I really was from them and become them by osmosis. Pamela, another scholarship girl, never seemed to understand that. I think that's what annoyed my dad about her. She thought she was there to learn trigonometry. The first day of 7th grade, Pamela met me and my cubby. I hadn't seen her in almost 3 months. She looked childlike and young in her too big secondhand uniform, and I felt 100 years old. It was like that relativity thing where a century had passed for me and just 3 months for her. She'd gotten all tidy on her first day back. Fresh blazer, iron shirt, pants creased, her BFF half-heart necklace dangling, even though I'd stopped wearing my half months before. "Yes, Kathy, I missed you so much," she cried. And then she hugged me and squealed this high-pitched, enthusiastic squeal that made me want to stab my own ears and then stab her too. All breathless, she told me about the lake cottage and the lame stuff she'd done with the kids she'd met there, and that she thought was scandalous, like role-playing MHA and taking turns reading the sexy parts of romance novels. I wanted to puke at the nerdness. She kept talking with this fierce, earnest intensity, and I felt bad for her and bad in general. I'd spread my wings. I was different now, a moth or a butterfly. It didn't matter. All that mattered was we no longer fit. "Let's sign up for all the same after school," she cried, which was impossible because I'd already been practicing field hockey with Rhonda and Lola and had made the team. After that, we do swimming, and in the spring we do tennis. We decided this. "I can't," I said, right as Rhonda and Lola walked up. Rhonda looked especially cool. She had this thing where she rolled her sleeves to her elbows and rolled her knee-high socks around her ankles, like 4 little donuts. It was her trademark. Some people copied, but they just looked stupid. Lola's trademark was her dyed bright purple hair and her straightened into ringlets down her back. She wore her uniform skirt a size too small. People copied that look too, but nobody looked half as hot. They told me I needed a trademark, so I'd cut my sweater vest down the middle and made it into a safety pin cardigan. Punk rock. Today was my debut with it. I felt stupid, and it was pretty sure I looked stupid, but probably people would think I was making a joke. I would then agree that yes, I'd been making a joke. "Hey, slave," Rhonda called to me. Pamela narrowed her eyes, like she was about to defend me, which would have been suicidally stupid, but not out of character. She thought we were still penguined, even though she'd only sent me 2 postcards all summer. I'd known the girl for 7 years, and she'd sent me a picture of Niagara Falls and a picture of Lake Ontario with a scrawl on the back about what an amazing time she was having. Rhonda grabbed my hand, and Lola grabbed the other hand. I felt strong like that. I felt like I wasn't a person. I was a bigger part of a bigger thing, a cell in a great, mindless organism. "You look constipated," Rhonda told Pamela. "You're like a giant X-Lax emergency." Pamela's face went red, and her lower lip got all quivery. She looked only at me. Her problem was that she didn't know that none of this mattered. We could say and do anything to each other, and it meant nothing because the world was falling apart. The whole system was broken into pieces, and she was playing make-believe at summer camp. In a way, I was helping her. I was explaining it to her, and also, I was just really mad. 2 frigging postcards. She brought this on herself. "Smells like it too," I said. "She's full of shit up there." Then we 3 turned, a connected chain of perfection, and left her behind. That was so long. I didn't know it would be so long.
Oh, not long at all. If we weren't out of time.
It was
long. I like a nice, good, long story, and that is in Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet. Which number of the zine is it in, Sarah?
It's number 42, and that's probably the first 15-20% of it.
I can't wait to read the rest of it. That is Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet from Small Beer Press. That's where you can hear the rest of that short story. Of course, don't forget February 2nd is the launch date for Good Neighbors. We're going to wrap it up. Sarah, if you'll stick around after we end the broadcast, but at this point, we will thank everyone for coming. Great to see everyone in the chat room. Thanks for coming and spending the time with us. And of course, thank you so much to Sarah Langan for talking about her new book and her work. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Okay, we're going to run the credits. Have a great night, everyone.